Dear learners, welcome to the course on Essentials of Financial Management. We have so far discussed in this particular module the conceptual framework of dividend and its different form and also the different patterns in which dividend is paid to the shareholder. And then we have also discussed one of the relevancy theory given by the Walter. Now, the second relevancy theory have been propounded by the Gordon. So, today we shall discuss the Gordon's relevancy theory, where it would be covering in the later part of discussion the proposition on which the Walter dividend policy is based, the assumptions that have been made for proving that there exists a relationship between the dividend payment and the valuation of the firm, the formula which have been followed by the practical problem, and finally, the merit and demerit of this particular theory. The Gordon has put forth a model arguing for the relevance of dividend decision to the valuation of the firm. Now, this model is very beneficial for estimating the intrinsic value of a stock. Secondly, it would also help in evaluating investment opportunities, and finally, determining the effect of dividend policy changes on the price of the share. Now, as we have seen that the relevancy theory given by the Walter has taken the help of certain assumption, the Gordon has also made certain assumption to prove his point that the relevance theory is very crucial for determining the market price of the share. Let us find out what are the assumptions. The model is founded on the several assumptions where the firm uses only retained earning for financing its investment program. That means, there is no other sources of finance like the debentures, equity share, preference share or any type of loan taken from the financial institution has been used by the firm. Now, the R and K will also remain unchanged in future. The R, that means, the internal rate of return and the cost of capital will remain constant in future. The firm has perpetual life, the corporate tax do not exist, and the retention ratio, that is represented by B, once decided by the company, will also remain constant. So, the growth rate of the company, that is denoted by G, and which is a product of the internal rate of return and the B, that is the retention ratio of the company, will also remain constant. Now, the formula given by the Gordon can be seen as the market price of the share is equal to the E, that is the earning of the company, 1 minus B. 1 minus B here is the fraction of earning which is retained by the company. So, if I say 1 minus B, 1 minus retained earning is nothing but the dividend paid to the shareholders, and the whole would be discounted using the two variable, that is K minus G. K here represent the cost of capital, whereas G is nothing but the growth rate of the company. So, if we see P is the price of shares, E earning per share of the company, B is the retention ratio, 1 minus B represent the percentage of earning which is distributed to the shareholder as dividend, K is the capitalization rate or the cost of capital, and G, it is the growth rate which is a product of R and the retention ratio, that is the B. Now, we can also discuss the formula given by the Gordon with the help of a practical problem, where we assume that the rate of return may vary from 12%, 10%, 8%. This 12%, 10%, 8% is nothing but the representing the nature of the company in terms of the growth rate. Okay. So, a growing firm would have a rate of return equal to 12%. Now, a normal firm has been represented having a growth rate of 10% and a declining firm whose rate of return is 8% and K here is 10%, and we have to find out the value of the share when the earning is rupees 10 and the payout ratio is 20%. 60% and also the 80%. So, we will try to prepare a matrix after calculating the price of share in 3 different scenario in terms of paying dividend for 3 different firm, growth firm, normal firm and the declining firm. Let us start with the step number 1, where the growth firm which is having the R greater than K, that means 12% is greater than 10%, that is the capitalization rate. Here in our problem, the earning per share is 10, required rate of return, that is the capitalization rate is 10%, or we can also say 0.10. Rate of return on investment is 12%, because we are discussing the growth firm, which is represented by 0.12, and the same has to be discussed keeping in mind when the payout ratio is either 25% and the retention is 75%, or in the other scenario when we would discuss the normal firm and the declining firm. Let us start the calculation. Now, the first and foremost step is to calculate the G, that is the growth rate for a growth firm. Now, here when the payout ratio is 25%, that means we are paying only 25% of earning in the form of dividend, and rest of the earning, that means the 75% is retained in the company. So, when we assume that the company is earning 12% on 75%, that is retained in the company, now the growth rate is 0.75 into 0.12, that is the rate of return, which gives us 0.090 or as 9% as the growth rate of the company. I hope this calculation is clear to all of you. Let me once again repeat, what is the growth rate? Growth rate is nothing but the rate at which company would grow, and this we can get by multiplying the amount of profit retained in the business with the growth rate which is applicable to the company. So, here we multiply 0.75, that is the retained earning, with the growth rate, that is 12%, we get as the 9%. Now, the second step is to apply the same growth rate in the Gaussian formula and find out the value of the share. So, here as per the equation, we have to substitute the formula with the figure. Here the E is nothing but the 10 rupees, the 1 minus B, B is the fraction of profit which is retained, and in this case it is 75% over 0.75%, and K is 10%, whereas the growth rate we have already calculated has to be 9%. Now, if we solve this equation, we get 10 into 0.25, that is divided by the difference between the cost of capital and the growth rate, and the result we get as the value of the share to be 250. Now, it is very logical that when the growth rate is higher than the cost of capital, which in our case is 12%, is more than the K, that is 10%, it is very well acceptable that the price of the share would increase. Why it would increase? Because now there was a choice whether the company pay dividend or to retain profit. Now, and it is quite a matter of common sense that whosoever is making the better use of funds should own the fund. Now, when the company is growing at a rate of 12% and has promised to pay the financier only 10%, that means there is an additional 2% of rate of return being enjoyed by the company, and that is the reason why the company has been able to increase the price of share to the extent of rupees 250, and that would not be true in the subsequent slides. We can say when the payout ratio is increased to 60%, resulting in a retention ratio which is 40%. Let us find out the growth rate, which is nothing but the 40%, that is the B or retention ratio multiplied with the growth rate, that is the 12%, which is applicable to a growth company, which gives us the 4.8%. Now, if the growth rate is 4.8% and we substitute the figures into a formula, we can see that the value has slightly decreased. It has decreased drastically from 250 to 115.40, and the case 3 is even worse, where payout ratio has been increased to the extent of 80% and company is retaining only 20% of profit. So, growth rate here is 0.20 into 0.12, giving us 2.4%, and carrying on this the same calculation for this scenario, we can see that the value of the share has further declined to 105.86. So, Gordon was trying to prove that there is a relationship between the dividend policy and the valuation of firm, and has also been successful in doing so, because we have seen that the value of the share that was 250 when the payout ratio was merely 25% for a growth rate has come down to 115. In the case when payout ratio was increased to 60% and has further decreased to 105.86 when the payout ratio has been increased to 80%. So, this is the summary table where we can conclude about the optimum payout ratio for a growing firm based on the Gordon's proposition that there exists a relationship. Yes, in the case of a growth firm, share value tend to decline in correspondence with an increase in the payout ratio or a decrease in the retention ratio. So, this table would give you a bird eye view as what happens to the value of the firm when there are different cases of paying dividend and retaining the profit. I hope this is clear to you all, but still if you have any problem, you can write back to me and I would love to give the answer to you all. Now, the same exercise that we have done while discussing the Walter's relevancy theory of dividend, now it is time to look at the value of the firm for a normal firm, which is having a rate of return equal to the cost of capital. Now, the process starts with the case 1, where the payout ratio is only 25%, whereas company retaining 75%. So, growth rate is which is a product of B, that is the retention ratio, into the R, that is the growth rate, gives us the 7.5% or 0.075. Now, the second step is to apply the same value into our formula, and we get the earning remains constant, which is 10%, and for a normal firm, if we choose to retain 75% of the total earning, we can see the value of the share is rupees 100. So, it is very well understood that when the normal firm is incurring a rate of return that is 10% and which is just sufficient to recover the cost of capital, which is also 10% in this case, the value of the firm is rupees 100. And if you compare this with the growing firm, we can see that there is a difference on account of 2% additional growth rate that was enjoyed by a growth firm in the first scenario. Now, the case number 2 can be seen where the payout ratio has been increased to 60%, leaving a retention ratio merely 40%. Growth rate is here 0.04 and the ratio of retention and dividend payment has resulted in rupees 100 as the value of the share. And so is the case number 3. Even when payout ratio has increased to 80%, leaving only 20% in the firm, the ratio was not creating any difference in the value of the firm. It is because that the R is equal to the K. So, a normal firm we can conclude that would not pay much attention as to what should be the dividend payout ratio, what amount of earnings should be retained in the company, because the share value remain constant regardless of changes in the dividend policy. So, here we can apply the same process for a declining firm and the 3 different scenario where payout ratio is 25%, 60%. Okay. So, growth rate in this case comes out to be 0.06 or 6%, and if we apply the formula by substituting the values in our practical problem, we get to see that a rate of return which is only 8% has further resulted in a very low price of share, which is 62.5%. But as we keep on increasing the payout ratio to 60%, then the value has slightly increased from 62.5 to 88.24%. This is because the dividend payment has given some amount of capital in the hand of the shareholder, retaining lesser profit where the company was not being able to utilize this fund in a very appropriate manner, improving the profitability. So, it is better to give away the dividend, and this has been further proven by the case number 3, where the payout ratio is increased to 80% and the value has further increased to 95.24. Let us have a look at the summary of the declining firm and their value in 3 different scenarios, and we can conclude that in case the firm is a declining firm, that it is having a growth rate which is lower than the cost of capital, the share value tend to rise in correspondence with the rise in dividend payout ratio or a decrease in the retention ratio. So, we have seen that a growth firm would have the 100% payout, 100% retention ratio, whereas in the case of a declining firm, the optimum ratio is one where the 100% or 10% earning is given to the shareholder in the form of dividend. But for a normal firm, it hardly matters whether the firm pays dividend or not pay dividend, because the value of the share will remain unchanged, it will remain constant. This is the bird eye view of the 3 firms: growth firm, normal firm and the declining firm. In the 3 different scenario where company is following different dividend payout ratio and their retention ratio. And we can say for a growth firm, the journey started from 250, but it came down to 105.86. It is a very smooth journey for a normal firm, leaving no worries to the finance manager as what should be the dividend payment ratio for increasing the value of the share as it remained constant, but for a declining firm, yes, the optimum ratio has to be decided carefully by the management, because the value we can see it has increased from 62.50 to 95.24. So, it is a game of just the rate of return and the cost of capital, which has to be kept in mind by all the prudent managers while designing the dividend policy of a firm, because the shareholders would never remain indifferent as far as the dividend income and the capital gain is concerned. So, for most of the investors, it is always important to receive the regular income in the form of dividend, and there are categories of the investors who would like to have a higher retention ratio if they feel that the company is having some good projects in hand and it is going to multiply their return in future. So, with this we come to the conclusion for a growth firm that share value declines as payout ratio increases. Normal firm would have the payout ratio and its impact on market price of share unchanged, but yes, for a declining firm, share value would increase when the payout ratio increases. So, with this we can also see merit and demerits of the Gordon's approach. Just like the Walter, the Gordon has also been able to prove that the investors always pay for dividend as current income to dividend, because in future there are a lot of uncertainty involved, and it is always preferable to have the current income, because money received today is better than the money received tomorrow. That is a time value of money principle, and as a result, in sharply contrast with Walter's approach, there are certain cases when R is equal to K. So, leaving no point of deciding the dividend policy by paying much time and energy while designing it. Let us see the merits of Gordon's approach. One is very simple to understand. It is clear model which has established that how the earning and the dividend and the retention, these three variables are interlinked and they can together move up and down the market price of the share. The approach has also given much focus on the payment of dividend, because it is a key factor in determining the value of the firm. This model has also taken a very long term perspective, because it is based on the assumption of a constant growth rate, which is suitable for companies with a dividend policy of stable dividend growth over the long term. So, this kind of company which is not going to pay irregular dividend, where the dividend payment is directly linked with the earning proposition, can follow the Gordon's approach for finding out the value. So, it is very helpful in management while deciding the dividend policy, but at the same time it is also useful for mature company, particularly for established firm which has a track record of the stable and predictable dividend payment. But this theory is also based on certain assumptions which do not hold true in the real life situations. So, number one is that the sensitive to estimates. So, when we assume that the growth rate and the required rate of return, the nature of financing changes, the R and K both can change. And this is also not suitable for a company which is not paying dividend, because we have in this model the companies and their dividend payment ratio. So, which cannot be applied when the company is not paying dividend. And like any other model given by the Walter as under the relevancy theory, the share price would not remain in isolation, and there would be impact of market conditions, investor sentiments and risk profile of the company. So, thinking that the company's final value would remain indifferent from all these external factors, it is something which is impractical, which is not very realistic assumptions. So, with this we can also see that the cost of capital would sometime be greater than the growth rate. So, this is also something which is which may result in negative values, and external financing is not being used by the company, which is again something not very real in the practical life. So, in this case every company along with the retained earning may resort to debt financing and also the other kind of financing. So, on these grounds the Gordon's irrelevancy theory can be criticized, but yes, the model has been successful in proving that the relationship between the R and K, the relationship between dividend policy and the valuation of the firm do exist. So, with this we come to the end of this section, where we have discussed the relevancy theory by the Gordon while establishing the value of the firm. So, thank you for your patient hearing and the time. Thank you very much.